Hello, all. It is NG, and I'm here today to talk with my fancy rainbow graph here about difficulty. I'm certain you know that from the title of the video, but I figure I'd restate it in case you just blindly clicked. Now, difficulty is a difficult subject, and in order to break it down, before we even talk about Darktide, which is, I know I've already got people, keyboard warriors in the comments typing how Darktide is already way too hard or whatever. Let's talk about difficulty in general in games and what makes it a concept that we keep coming back to in terms of gaming culture and in terms of like as a society, difficulty in all sorts of games. So let's first talk about like why there is difficulty, and that all ties into the psychological effects of overcoming challenges, right? We as a species have been highly incentivized by our evolution to overcome challenges that are opposed to us. And so there's always a sense of gratification in overcoming some sort of challenge. However, we also, in that undertaking, face defeat, right? But we want to have challenges that are within our reach that are not frustratingly difficult. This is called, in education speak, this is a zone of proximal development. It means basically you are not getting absolutely blown out of the water by the difficulty of whatever challenge you put yourself against. You're in a position where you think, man, if I had another try at that, I could probably beat it this time. Or if not the very next time, then 2 times after that. That is the sort of difficulty that players and people in general are really drawn to, something that pushes them to grow themselves and grow their skills. And the people that make games, especially some of the most popular games in the world, they know this. They know this about human psychology and they exploit it in order to get people to play their game. And as we all know, the most popular games in the world are player versus player games. They are games like League of Legends and CS:GO and Valorant, right? They are they're very competitive games, and even if you're a casual player of these games, even if you're not playing in the ranked ladder, the game does internal calculations to figure out what sort of players you should be placed against, and it does this by calculating your MMR. I think it stands for matchmaking or ranking or something like that. Basically, the system is trying to increase your challenge as long as you're winning more than you're losing. And then when you finally level out and you're losing as much as you're winning, that's where you will stay. And that is because players find the most engagement when they're losing as much as they are winning. And that is seen in pretty much every PvP game that has a system just like this. Now, there are outlier players who do not play games for the conventional reasons that others do. There are certainly probably a handful of players that play Darktide and literally just queue up for difficulty 1 missions and walk through the mission and stare at all the scenery. That is fine too, right? But unfortunately, that is not the general type of player, and so I don't really want to focus on that too much today. We are focused more squarely on players who are playing Darktide or playing games like it for the competitive challenge, to overcome a challenge to achieve some goal set by themselves or set by the game. So, speaking of achieving some goal set by the game, do I think, if they do add more difficulty to the game, do I think there should be any additional rewards added to it? My answer to this is no. I do personally believe that currently, since most players are playing somewhere in this 3 to 4 to 5 difficulty level bracket, that's the fair place to have most of the resources be in the game. If you were to put a higher level challenge, it should be purely for the sport of the hunt, right? It should not be something that players are having to force themselves to slog through in order to get special resources. And we'll talk about more of that in a little bit when we talk about Fat Shark's previous dabblings in a higher difficulty level. But that is sort of where I stand as far as increased rewards. I also firmly believe that there should be no changes made to the original 5 difficulties of the game. unless there are some like universal tweaks to like spawns that affect all the difficulties in general. But I think they should stay roughly as they are, and that's because let's kind of refer to our graph now. That is because this is our bell curve, right? This is our bell curve of players on our y-axis here. Man, my math teacher from high school is gonna be so fucking proud of me if they see this. So this is the number of players as a distribution, and down here is the difficulty levels. So I forget what they're actually called. I think this one's heresy. Number 3 is heresy, and 5 is damnation, right? And I know that most players are not playing damnations, right? I think most players are probably playing 4s, erring to the side of 3s. And I figure that by having gone into my fair share of quick plays over my time, my 1,500 plus hours playing the game. I've hit quick plays on many different difficulties, leveling my different characters, or just getting my weeklies done. And what I'm currently finding is that when I quick play into level 1s and 2s, it takes forever to find anybody to actually join those games. And that's just quick play. I mean, it could match with anyone, especially when the event was going on, and I needed to just get quick completions. I was queuing up for some of these just to run through the levels and get the level completions. But the game was unable to find anyone to match me with on ones, like nearly at all. I would be playing with bots half the game, and then if anyone did join, they were like 9 times out of 10, they were a player who had hundreds of levels and hundreds of hours, and they were intending to do the same thing I was, which was just do a quick speed run with no enemies in the whole level. There are still players, new players who play at these difficulties, but generally they move past them pretty quickly. I think most players are playing up at 3 and 4, just based on the number of times where I've gone to hit a quick play, and these games fill up instantly. 5s also fill up very quickly, and then on the upper echelon, I didn't write it on here, but we're talking about Auric Maelstrom. Auric Maelstroms are kind of a hit or miss for me. If I might make a digression here, I think Auric Maelstroms are kind of sloppy. Like, they do not represent a balanced upgrade in terms of enemy power, because some of the modifiers are just crap, right? I think the best one is the additional mini bosses that can spawn. I think that adds a cool level of power to and challenge to the game, but I do not think that the challenge that is posed by all of the enemies are scabs and there is no ranged ammunition on the map is fun or interesting at all. It really kind of gimps like certain builds, and I would love a sandbox, a higher difficulty sandbox that lets me play with whatever build I want to without having to worry about oh shit, there's actually no ammo on the map. It's fair enough that they're mostly armored enemies. I could see building around that, but taking the ammo away from players is kind of a strange choice. Anyway, let's put that aside. So this is our current sort of player balance. Most players are hanging out, playing difficulty 4s, maybe erring on the side of 3. Let's take a trip back in time, 2 years plus, whenever the fuck this game came out. What was the distribution of players like then? Well, I know because I was there and I was trying to find games, and it was something like here. Most players were playing 2s and going into 3s. There is a level gating system where you cannot play a 2 or a 3 until you've reached a certain level, but once you had played enough level 1 games to get that level and play a 2 or a 3, almost every player was going past that to get to the 2s or 3s, because 1s, I don't know when the last time any of you has played a 1 is, but 1s have almost no enemies in the whole map. 2s have a few more enemies, but there's not really any elites to speak of. 3 is when things really start to kick off. So I think that this was about how I feel the balance was back then. It was unheard of for really anybody to be playing 5s. People were pushing them on like day 1 or 2, but with with pre-made groups and really well laid out plans. There were certain maps and certain strategies that you would use to get through these fives, but it was kind of a tenuous thing. Not very many people doing it at all. It was rare enough that people were getting lots of views on YouTube for like, oh my god, we did a fucking damnation. Like, that's so crazy. But nowadays, I mean, a lot of people are doing damnations all the time. So what happened? It can't just be that, like, they gave us more, like, weapons or anything, because there's barely been any addition to weapons. And the game itself hasn't been made any easier. Like, there's not less enemies than there were when the game started. There's two big things that have happened. The first big thing that's happened is players have increased their skill. There is such thing as solving a game, right? Players have figured out what are the good weapons to use. Players have figured out what are the best ways to progress through levels. Players have figured out how to deal with X enemy, like what attacks to dodge when. Players' skill has just increased generally, and this has given a slow and gradual increase over the last 2 whatever years to where we are today. The other thing that has really bumped it up in one fell swoop, I would say, is the particular introduction of the talent trees. The talent trees were a huge jump in player power. We already had the ultimate abilities, but all the additional like little tweaks that you can make to them, well, we had some of the ultimate abilities, right? But things like the veteran shout, like all the tweaks that can be made to those, and all the additional boons that you got out of it. Think about this. The game was no more difficult before, right? It was the same level of difficulty on difficulty 5, but when they added in the talent trees, you got all those like blessings and like perks and crazy like stat increases, all the keystone power increases, free reloads, all that stuff came into the game, and that was a huge jump in player power. So when players get a jump in power, they go to higher difficulties because, well, in the base difficulties, there's an incentive materially to get more materials when you play at higher difficulties. But there's also a psychological incentive to, now that you have these bigger, better toys, to find something to test them out on, right? You have a new plasma cannon, right? You got a fucking top perfect roll plasma gun, and you've got the executioner's stance, tree set up on your veteran, but there's no crushers in tier 3s. So you play tier 4s, and you maybe get to shine a couple times with it during the missions, but what you really find is that tier 5s have a lot of those armored targets that you really like to shoot. So you're psychologically incentivized, the better your gear is, to fight those higher challenges, because it's just more of a chance to do what's enjoyable in Darktide, which is flex on the enemies with your power. Now, you're not going to push yourself. If you are not mechanically skilled enough to take a 5, you're not going to jump into a 5 and get your ass absolutely beat, go down 50 times, and then go back to 5s. You'll play a 4, right, if you're just not good enough to handle that, and that's okay. But generally, as you give players more power, they are going to gravitate higher and higher on this curve. They are going to undertake higher difficulties, not only because there are more rewards in the game structured as it currently is to undertaking higher difficulties, but because psychologically it is rewarding to undertake these higher difficulties and defeat them. It feels really cool to, beat the highest difficulty in a game, and it becomes more accessible to players the more power you give them. To envision this a different way, instead of buffing player power, instead of giving players a talent tree that buff their player by their player power, what if they reduced enemy power? What if they came into the game and said, oh, you know what? Enemies on all difficulty levels, half. There's going to be half as many enemies. Well, what would happen then is the difficulty would slide this way, right? And instead of, now that players that used to be playing at 3s are facing the same number of enemies playing on 5s, well, they're naturally going to play where they were used to. They're not going to be like, oh, well, 3 still gives me the same reward. I think I'll just still keep playing on this. Now there's half as many enemies. Most players, the vast majority of players, are not going to do that. They're going to be like, oh, well, I was used to playing against this many enemies, and I can get more rewards for playing on 5. Let's go ahead and play on 5. So by nerfing the enemy power, it's the same thing as buffing player power. These are two sides of the same coin. Now, there hasn't been a real change to enemy power in a while, but we could be seeing one in the future. I have also, before I go into talking about like how Fatshark can deal with this, I have also had people say like, well, why don't you just do something different? If you're so bored with the game, why don't you do something to reduce your power? Why don't you take a break, for a while and not play this game and then come back and, you'll have to learn it all over again. Well, first of all, I want to play this game. Like, I genuinely do want to play this game, so I don't really like the idea of taking a 6-month break as a great way to enjoy the game more. That means I'm just, like, not getting to play the game for 6 months. Also, so much of this game, because it is so closely tied with Vermintide, is, like, baked into my cerebral cortex at this point. I could dodge an overhead from a mauler in my sleep, basically. If you played the trapper like net sound behind me at my job, I would probably physically try to dodge it in real life. Like that's how much I think about this game, and that's how like plugged in I am. I could take a very long break from this game, and I could come back, and it's like riding a bike for me, honestly, because I've invested that much of my time in it. The other thing is people say is like, well, what about like not using optimal talents and not using like the best weapons and stuff like that? I think that might work for some people, but that I am just not that sort of player. I want to play with the best toys, the coolest builds, the ones that do the most kaboom, big destruction, destroy the enemies the most. I want to play with the cool toys. I want to have the fun that the game allows me to do. But the problem I'm currently having with the game is that when I'm playing with all the best toys, the sandbox is not big enough, right? Right now, it feels like when I'm trying to make a video for you guys for Darktide and I'm trying to like showcase these guns, half the time I'm not able to get the kills I want to get the kills, not because I'm not skilled enough, but because other players are killing these enemies like before I even get to see them, because they're rounding the corner and they're just instantly dropping them, because there's like the plasma gun exists and stealth zealots exist. Like they can just drop enemies no problem. They can handle the mission basically without me. I could just hang around. I could probably just walk through the level and they would just carry me. And that's just sort of a testament to like how far some players' skill has gone. So it would be really good if there was a challenge level that encourages basically everybody in the team has to be contributing, or it's not going to go so well. So that is how I feel about me dealing with this issue instead of Fatshark dealing with this issue. And now let's talk about Fatshark dealing with this issue. First of all, they know it's an issue, because in one of the recent updates, they have already said that they are now going to be monitoring player power, especially now that this update is released, or on the 26th it's releasing, and it will sort of act as a great equalizer to player power. They will be able to see, how strong are the strongest builds that everyone is going to be using, and should we make enemies more difficult? Should we add a new difficulty? So they are aware of this as an issue, and they have dealt with it before, right? They just had Vermintide 2, it was the last game, and they added an additional difficulty after release. It was called Cataclysm. Now, there's two things I think you should know about Cataclysm. One is that Cataclysm did not offer any additional rewards over the rewards offered for the previous difficulty, which was Legend. So you would get the same reward for completing a Legend mission as for completing a Cataclysm mission. That was done to keep players that did not have the mechanical skill or the desire to beat this like burned into their soul from forcing themselves to play Cataclysm for fear of missing out on loot, right? They did not want people to feel like they were obligated to play Cataclysm to get the best items in the game. Because this was the loot box era, and loot boxes dropped from completing missions in that game. So the players who did not want to undertake that additional challenge kept playing Legend in order to get their loot boxes. And then the players who did could undertake it. Now, did I undertake playing Cataclysm? For the most part, unless I was playing with a coordinated group, no. Because here's the second thing about Cataclysm. It was fucking hard, man. Like, already Legend was harder than the Damnation is in Darktide, because you had less tools in your kit. There was no everyone didn't spawn with like 3 grenades. Their ultimate skills were a lot less influential. Weapons in general, there was no weapon that was anywhere near as destructive as the plasma gun or the flamethrower, right? All of these weapons and tools that we have at our disposal were not there. And there were additionally patrols, like Chaos Warrior patrols, that were basically, in effect, 10 crushers that would come barreling down on you. Now, these do still exist in Darktide, but they are ultra rare. I mean, I can count on probably 1 or 2 hands the number of times in the last year that I have run into a patrol of any sort in Darktide. And even then, you have so many ways to deal with it that it just blows out of the water. So you already had that on Legend. Well, Cataclysm, what it did is you normally had a patrol of like I think it was like 12 Chaos Warriors on Legend. On Cataclysm, 18 Chaos Warriors, and their health 300%. So triple health, and I think it was double damage. So these things are insanely beefy. If you did not have boss killers, if you did not have pots at the ready, stuff ready to go, and you accidentally pulled a Chaos Patrol, you are losing the game. You are dying. Think about if there is any singular thing, Demon Host included in Darktide, that if you accidentally were unaware of triggering it, that you could lose the game. I don't think there is, right? So this is something that people were like stealthing. They were waiting for these patrols to go by because they were that level of challenge. And that was really cool because you are supposed to be fighting against the odds. We are rejects fighting against overwhelming hordes of heretics. We are not supposed to be gods walking through this, in my personal opinion. Now, so that's the level of difficulty we were looking at. And generally, I didn't play those when I was playing with randoms because it was just soul crushing. Like, I could play it, but at a certain point, if your allies aren't picking up their slack, you get overwhelmed and you die. And it was just frustrating. When I had really good allies, I would play some because it felt really cool to play them. Then they released Chaos Waste. So Chaos Waste is a game mode in Vermintide 2 that is a roguelike game mode. And in your travels through the Chaos Waste, you gain additional blessings. Literally, a lot of them are the blessings that they now use on weapons in Darktide. Things like you throw 2 bombs instead of 1, or you arc lightning, like a Mjolnir arcs chain lightning out of your weapons on critical hits, or you have guaranteed critical hits for X number of seconds after you use your ultimate ability, right? Those are the sort of blessings that you would gain over the course of your travails through the Chaos Waste. And what would happen is, once you got all those blessings, if you're only playing on Legend difficulty, it was too easy. You would blow everything out of the water. You'd roll all the way to the end, and you'd barely feel like you got to play with the tools in your kit at all. So, before the game kind of petered out and died, let's actually check it right here. Let's see how many people are playing right now. Yeah, 1,700. That's not great. But before the game kind of really, all the player base abandoned it, what you would see is that in normal games, in the adventure mode games, most players are playing on Legend, right? Legend and some champion. But when you switch over to the Chaos Waste lobby, most players are playing on Cataclysm because that is the level of challenge that is appropriate for the level of power that you get in that mode. And the additional stuff that we get through all these blessings and talent trees and stuff in Darktide that make us more powerful, they are skewing us in this rightward direction. They are making it easier to beat higher difficulties. And so you'll want a greater and greater challenge just naturally. You want something to use your sick-ass new toys on, right? There's new awesome blessings that are coming to the plasma gun for the veteran. And I don't know if it'll even be any use, because the plasma gun already instantly kills instantly kills everything in the game except for bosses. What point is there to have even more damage on it? Why does it need to critically hit 25% more? A normally charged shot already kills a crusher. So there needs to be something to do with this extra power, or else it's all for naught. So, just to take us over a recap of everything I've said so far, because I know I've been rambling for a while. This is where the game started, right? Somewhere in here. Most players were in this difficulty range, with a very, very scarce few players who were playing at difficulty 5 on release. And over time, the game has crept upwards. Or the players have crept upwards. They've increased their own player skill. There's been jumps upwards every time that there are new powerful weapons released, or talent trees are added, or some other changes made to the game that allows players to have an easier way to deal with the challenges the game poses to them. And in 2 years from now, in another lifetime of this game, where will it be? Well, it's not going back this way, right? They're going to continue to release new and powerful weapons, hopefully. They are going to, at the very least, the game's mechanics will not change, so players' mechanical expression, mechanical skill will continue to increase. Now, there is an upper limit, but they'll continue to go this way. And I want you to look at this red line that I showed earlier. This cohort of people that includes me. I am in this little sliver here. These are the people that feel that the game doesn't have anything left to offer them, that they've undertaken every challenge that there is that the game currently has to offer, that they've beaten it, they've walked away, and they dust it off their hands, and they're getting a little bit bored. And as the player curve, the bell curve shifts further and further to the right, and more players are able to beat Damnations, are able to beat Auric Damnations, are able to beat Auric Maelstroms, there's going to be an increasingly large cohort of players who find themselves with nothing left to do, with nothing left to challenge them, with nothing left to play for, other than just to repeat the same missions and hang out with their friends. There needs to be a challenge. There needs to be something to push players, something to do past that line, because you might be right. This is where we are today. You might be right here today, right? But in 2 years from now, if you keep playing this game and you keep improving your skills, which if you keep playing, you will improve your skills at the game, you will be over here. You will be in this cohort with me. You will have beaten everything the game has to offer, and you will want more. And I want more for this game. I want it to have longevity, just like Vermintide did. I want it to have a challenge that I can continue to come back to and feel like, man, I'm having a good day. Let's see if I can beat this. Because some days you just get lucky. You get unlucky and you can't beat the level. But some days you get in there, oh man, I'm feeling it, and you have an excellent fucking run. Like you clean up everything, your skills are on point, and that feels amazing. But right now, like I could take a 6-hour nap, wake up, not drink any coffee, and go clear a damnation like easy peasy, and that doesn't feel rewarding anymore. Anyway, guys, that is everything I had to say. Hopefully that made sense. It got a little bit rambly at the end there, but that is how I feel about the current state of things. I really love getting more player power. I love getting more tools to play with, more toys. I'm really excited to try out new builds with the crafting update. After a while, though, I feel like it's going to get a little bit stale, because it is just going to absolutely wreck the fuck out of Damnation as it currently is. I would love to have something beefier to sink my teeth into, something more chaos to destroy, to slay with our new toys. And as one final thing to say here, guys, I want to point out of my library here that I recently did some cleaning up. How many of these games have added difficulties after their release? Baldur's Gate added a difficulty after release. Deep Rock Galactic added difficulty after release. Gunfire Reborn added difficulty after release. Helldivers 2 controversially added difficulty after release. Path of Exile added Ruthless mode, which is also controversial. RimWorld literally has a slider that goes up to 500% difficulty, and their highest difficulty is called Losing is Fun. If that is not the mantra of a self-imposed challenge for a game, of a PvE game, I don't know what is. And Warframe has Steel Path. Terraria has Master Mode. All of these games, Space Marine 2 is getting a new difficulty upgrade in a month or so. All these games have added that difficulty because they understand that players are going to improve as they play, and they will seek a higher challenge to engage them in the game, to keep them coming back, to keep them playing, to keep them purchasing DLC or whatever it is. Anyway, that's my take on it, guys. Thank you very much for watching. Like and subscribe if you appreciate what I have to say. And just know I appreciate you whether or not you agree with me. Thanks, y'all.